9 o'clock Eastern time. So we're hours away from that, and we'll be taking you through every possible step, reaction, preview, what we need to know ahead of this. And we read off just an excerpt of the State of the Union address as it has been released here, saying, throughout our history, we've learned this lesson: when dictators do not pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos. They keep moving, and the costs and threats to America and the world keep rising. That's why the NATO alliance was created, to secure peace and stability in Europe. After World War II, the United States is a member, along with 29 other nations. It matters. American diplomacy matters. Putin's war was premeditated and unprovoked. He rejected efforts at diplomacy. He thought the West and NATO wouldn't respond, and he thought he could divide us here at home. Putin was wrong. We were ready. That is just a small portion of the address that will be given by President Biden a little bit later tonight. But as you can hear, the NATO alliance, he's going to be outlining that, the unity within all of these countries who are backing and supporting Ukraine, whether that be sanctions or via weapons, military. So this is just one of the major topics that President Biden will be outlining, but really trying to reinforce American diplomacy as well. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to step into some of the other stories of the day, what's happening across the country, including a bit of a rocket blast. So nice to mix things up a little bit here on Live Now. We'll see you back here in 2 minutes.
Verify ECS reduced for launch.
Verified.
25.
Status check.
Go Atlas.
Go Centaur.
Go goes T.
Parameters look good.
So taking
View
a
has
look
gone to
right
closed loop
now at the NOAA, who has launched America's next generation weather satellite. We weren't able to bring it to you live, so we just wanted to bring it to you now from NASA TV. We'll listen in to some of these commentators, but we had Fox weather reporters there down on the ground tracking the weather to make sure everything could go through well. And this is really going to change weather reading moving forward. This was in Cape Canaveral, Florida, a little bit earlier today. This high-tech satellite is going to provide America with the best images of Earth that we have seen yet. So we'll listen in here for just a little bit longer on NASA TV.
4 miles downrange distance, traveling at 1,900 miles per hour. RD-180 is now throttling back up. Now at 75 seconds into flight, Atlas is 13 miles in altitude, 10 miles downrange distance, traveling at 2,700 miles per hour. Now at 90 seconds into flight, ULA's Atlas V rocket weighs now just 1/2 of what it did at launch, burning propellant at a rate of more than 2,600 pounds per second. SRBs have burned out as expected, and we see a good SRB jettison. Vehicle is now executing closed-loop steering. Vehicle performance looks good at this time. Now 135 seconds into flight. The RD-180 has throttled down slightly. Vehicle performance continues to look good at this time. Tank pressures are stable and Atlas booster battery voltages remain in their expected ranges. Now the upper stage is preparing for its use. Centaur reaction control system is now pressurizing to flight levels. We have just over 1 minute until BECO. We're now seeing the RD-180 throttle limiting to maintain a 2.5 G acceleration limit. Standing by for payload fairing jettison. And we've seen a successful payload fairing jettison. RD-180 is throttled back up now. And the vehicle has reached a 4.6 G acceleration limit and will maintain this level through BECO. We've seen that the Centaur has begun its boost phase chill down sequence. And BECO, booster engine cutoff. Standing by for stage separation and a successful stage separation event. And we've seen pre-start on the RL-10. And MES 1, we have ignition for the first burn. This first burn of ULA's Centaur upper stage will place the GOES-T spacecraft into a parking orbit around the Earth. This burn will last just over 7 minutes. We're seeing the expected activity on the reaction control system as it begins its periodic firings to maintain thermal control conditioning. Upper stage systems look good at this time. Hydrazine line temperatures are approaching the bottle temperature as expected. The engine propellant utilization system has gone to closed loop control, and the engine response remains nominal. I just received word from the trajectory and performance group that booster performance was as expected for the booster phase of flight.
So we just wanted to show you this full launch from a little bit earlier today as, again, the next generation weather satellite being launched into air here into space. Fox Weather is here and set to revolutionize how you stay informed about the weather and America's weather forecast. They're about to get even better, and it's thanks to this new satellite that launched out of the world. Fox Weather meteorologist Steve Bender live at Cape Canaveral, Florida for us tonight. And Steve, this is a huge step for weather forecasting. You must be pretty pumped.
Yeah, good evening, Daytona. I am ecstatic right now. I mean, I got to see a rocket launch, so that's awesome. And then what it was carrying is going to benefit all of us for the next 10 to 15 years. So who would be excited about today? And so the concern moving in was the cumulus cloud rule. So we had some clouds that locked in over Florida and Cape Canaveral. That was the initial concern. But then the wind started to pick up. The good news behind that is it pushed all the clouds out of here, and then it just became, will the wind be too strong? Will that scrub the launch? Not the case for today. The window opened up at 4:38, and NASA sent the Atlas V rocket into the upper atmosphere 1 millisecond after that. So I do want to show you behind me is the clock. Normally that counts down to launch. Now it is counting up from when the launch happened. So over an hour and 55 minutes, that's when the Atlas V started launching, and it had 32 million horsepower behind it. And so it was out of here real quick. It reaches Mach 1, which is 767 miles per hour, just 35 seconds. But let's talk about what was on board. Daytona, that is the GOES-T satellite. That is the third satellite in the GOES-R series, and this is so important for us. As meteorologists, we use these tools from the satellites to improve our forecast. So what's going to happen is in the next few hours, it's going to reach 22,300 feet above the Earth's surface. So that's called geostationary orbit. It's going to sit over the North Pacific, the western and the central portion of the country, and it's going to give us real-time data, and it's going to feed it back to us. So I wanted to talk with the GOES-R series assistant program director. That was Jim Valenti. And he was telling me about the Lightning Mapper. That's the new tool that's on board the GOES-T satellite. And I asked him, why is this so important? And this is what he had to say.
The Lightning Mapper has really surprised us with its capabilities. It not only follows thunderstorms and provides, information about lightning that's happening through those severe storms, but it also out in the west gives us indications where we might have wildfires start that are caused by wildfire lightning.
And so as you just heard Jim talk about, it's out west. And so we look at that lightning mapper. The reason why it's so important is that we can see the cloud to ground strikes, right? We can see that on the surface here, but a lot of times we can't see the volatility and the raw energy embedded in the clouds themselves. So that's the cloud to cloud strikes. This can. And so that's what's going to be very beneficial, because then it'll talk about where the biggest risk is for some of these lightning strikes to hit out west to cause those fires. But then on top of that, we'll have the ABI. That's the Advanced Baseline Imager, and that will be able to look through the clouds and the smoke and look at the hottest part of the fire and then give that data back to the fire crews on the ground to help with containment. And controlling of these fires. And so there's just so many tools on board Daytona that we're excited about. And I'll tell you, this is only the beginning, because the next 10 to 12 years, we're going to be using this satellite and all of its data to help improve our forecast. So reporting from Cape Canaveral, we'll send it back to you.
Steve, a couple follow-up questions for you. Has this been in the works for a while? What's the timeline on this?
Oh yeah, this has been decades of hard work. Months of preparation leading up to this point. And so this is, again, the third satellite. The first satellite started all the way back in 2016. That was GOES-R. Then after that was GOES-S. So you can see the theme here with the letters. And that was 2018. Now we stand at 2022. And then actually my photographer Ben and I, we were just out at Lockheed Martin in Littleton, Colorado. So that's just outside of Denver, Colorado. We were in the clean room, and that's where sits Goes U. That's the final satellite in all of this series. That will actually launch in 2024. So to answer your question, this has been decades of work. And so successfully they have 3 satellites up there, and we're just waiting for the next one 2 years from now.
What's U going to be?
Yeah, Hughes is going to be the satellite that sits over the East Coast. So here's a good update that I should pass along, Daytona, is that this Goes T, initially it was just supposed to be put in storage. It wasn't supposed to be active until years from now. But Goes 17, which is the active one over the West Coast, it has a malfunction in the ABI, that main tool. So the one that sends us those cool images back from space looking at Earth, it overheats. So they're going to put that one in storage just as backup, put this Goes T into use days from now. And so eventually the Goes U's, once it gets up, that will be put into use eventually, so that way Goes R's can be retired. I know that's a lot of letters and numbers. Goes U's eventually will help us with the East Coast forecast as well.
Yep, this is why you do this job and I do not. We appreciate you and the whole Fox Weather team, and it's going to be even more precise. That's really exciting.
Yeah, no, this is big for us. So our forecasts are going to improve, and it's going to impact everyone here in the country. It's not just out west. That's where these storms originate. So Daytona, this is going to help everybody kind of prepare ahead of time as the severe weather rolls in.
All right, Fox Weather's Steve Bender live for us tonight in Cape Canaveral for what seemed to be a really beautiful day.
Yeah, it turned out to be great. Thank you, Daytona.
Thank you. All right, we're going to keep it moving here on Live Now from Fox as we are gearing up for big coverage tonight. State of the Union address, a live look from outside of the White House. We've seen a little bit of activity, but no President Biden quite yet. Stay with us. 8:30 Eastern Time to 10 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll have preview coverage. We'll have post coverage, all the reaction that you want to see here on Live Now, live on Unfiltered. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Daytona Everett, where we take you from one story to the next. One of the top stories today, players and their union leaders agreed unanimously not to accept MLB's final proposal, and there will be no deal on a new collective bargaining agreement, throwing MLB's regular season in doubt. Andrew Kraft spoke with sports legal expert Dan Lust about the ramifications underway. Here's a conversation.
Major news out of Major League Baseball. Players are rejecting MLB's final offer to end the lockout before the league's deadline to avoid canceled games for the regular season. Joining me now to discuss all of that, sports legal expert Dan Lust. Dan, this is very highly watched. What does this mean, though, for this season for Major League Baseball?
Well, you got to, I guess, at a certain point, trust what Rob Manfred's saying. Certainly, it means that we're not going to have a 162-game season. The power to have that is really within the hands of Rob Manfred. So, in theory, if the players turned around, they said, "Just kidding, we'll actually accept that last offer. We're really going to have a shortened season." So, really, that decision to shorten games lies with Rob Manfred. We can kind of unpack a little bit of how this came to be, but at least as of today, Rob Manfred is saying that the season will be shortened. I think that's his sense that the players are not going to turn around and accept that last offer. But, you know, you have almost about a month until opening day. I'm not sure why today means there's such a hard and fast deadline, but I guess you have to ask Rob Manfred that.
And all these negotiations are happening down in Florida. The players walked away just about an hour ago. Manfred is actually speaking at a news conference right now. You know, does that mean spring training, that's off the table? No more of that?
Well, I guess we'll have to go back. I mean, during the pandemic season, you know, this pandemic shortened season, we had a version of this like labor negotiations, which is an odd season. Normally you have a number of years before the CBA's negotiated. This is a weird context where we had like the pandemic negotiations and now we have like a full-blown CBA. So, you know, when last year, right, when we were dealing with the pandemic season, you had to push everything back and you had to give players, you know, pitchers and catchers times to warm their arm up and kind of have some semblance of baseball. You can't just kind of throw players into action without fear of injuries. So we still could have spring training. I think this is Manfred's way of saying we need some type of lag time between the time we strike a deal and the time the season starts. And to Rob Manfred, he doesn't think, you know, as of today, right, 30 days is enough. I think if you ask the players, they're going to say, well, we don't need a 30-day spring training. We could do something less than that. We've been staying in shape. So it doesn't necessarily mean no spring training. But I think for Manfred's point, I think he wants to now shift everything back so much so that it's going to cause the shortening of the season. Because, Andrew, remember, the end of the season's in November, October. So we got to worry about weather at that point.
That's right. You know, let's get into the negotiations themselves. What is the sticking point here? Maybe there are a few, but what can they not agree on that is prolonging this? This is the longest, basically, I don't want to say, but lockout in 30 years in the league's, you know, recent memory. Why can't they agree on some of these specific provisions? And what are they?
Yeah, there's a number of points here. I mean, they're fighting over a rookie wage scale, you know, for younger players. They were fighting over a playoff system, which they have somewhat come to terms with. But at the end of the day, it's really going to come down to money. The way the CBAs are negotiated is essentially.
And Dan, what is a CBA?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's money, right? Mr. Green is going to talk. That's all this is about at the end of the day. So the way that baseball negotiations works, similar to any type of professional sport, there is a pie of money, right? And that's going to be divided between the owners and players to some extent. So there's different concessions that are made to move from, we'll say, 47 points to 48 points, or, you know, to wherever you're getting. So it's a very dynamic negotiation. And so when the players give in one sense, they expect the owners, right, to walk back a little piece of that pie. So it's, you know, it's a complex negotiation. Essentially, Rob Manfred at a certain point said, hey, this is our best and final offer. This was on Monday, February 28th, before we have to cancel the season. And I guess they got pretty close. The players and the owners negotiated up until, I think, 2:45 in the morning. And then the owners said, well, just kidding. Let's make the deadline tomorrow. So we're making the joke online, like, was the Monday deadline real? Was the Tuesday deadline real? If you can come to terms on a deal on Wednesday, right, what's the difference? So, yes, Rob Manfred is canceling games, and some people will say that means the deadline was real, wasn't it? Not really. The deadline is whatever Rob Manfred wants to make it. So, yeah, that's essentially what we have here.
And just kind of, you know, the 30,000-foot view, especially for a lot of baseball fans, and they stuck with the MLB during the pandemic, and that season looked so different. And coming off the pandemic now that the league cannot agree to some of these provisions, it's really not a good look for the MLB, especially from a fan standpoint.
It's not. I mean, in baseball, you'd be a stranger to miss it, right? Football is taking a lot of the headlines recently, as is basketball. And baseball is kind of lagging behind, you know, in terms of popularity, even just social relevance on Twitter, right? So Baseball, of all of our sports, they had the, that 94 strike season, which a lot of people left. They came back with the steroid era, which was good and bad. But baseball in the last 20 years has really had a problem identifying superstars and putting them on a mantle. So I'm not really sure why that is. But baseball's really got to be careful here because they really did a poor job during the pandemic season. I think basketball did a great job. Football really had no delays whatsoever. They just kind of rolled into it. And baseball was the one, I don't want to get so political, but baseball is a socially distant sport, right? You have guys all around the diamond. And that's the one sport, not hockey, which is a contact sport, not basketball, contact sport, and football. Baseball was the one that was falling all over themselves and costing themselves games to be played. So the ownership at baseball maybe is due for a change. I don't want to be so hot takey, but I don't know why it's taken them so long. And the way these negotiations are being done, if you're saying that they're being done in bad faith, which is a fancy buzzword for us lawyers out there, you're not wrong. I can't really make sense of the delays here. Over and over. It's happened now twice with this regime on the union side and also the league side.
Dan, last question for you. We're early in the week still. There's still, do you think, opportunity to right this ship going forward? What do you think about that in the next couple of days?
Yeah, so opening day was supposed to be March 31st. So certainly from a time perspective, again, I'm happy to go on record as saying I think these deadlines are nonsensical. I think you have time to get a deal done and have games. Whether Manfred wants to walk that back is another story. He's a Harvard lawyer. He's very proud and worked for some prestigious firms. I think there is time to salvage this, but the question is, when you lock these CBAs in, it's for a number of years. It's not a 1 or 2 year deal. So you're going to have to be stuck. So the players have to feel really confident that it's a good deal for them. And unanimously, Andrew, this last offer was unanimously rejected across the board by all players. So, I think there's time to walk it back, but it seems like there's still a sizable gap between the two sides.
All right, Dan Lust, of course, time will tell. We'll definitely be bringing you on again in case a negotiation or an agreement is reached. Dan, thanks.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Just one of the many stories we'll be following here on Live Now from Fox. Great conversation right there. When we come back, our team out in Chicago is speaking with a student who's in Ukraine right now. She shares her story, what she's seeing, and what she's hearing. That's after the break.
I was asking if you're okay and if you're in a safe place right now. Where are you hunkered down?
Yes, I'm in a safe place now. Right now I'm at home because the subway is closed because there are too much people inside and we don't have ability to go there.
Are you in a place where you are hearing explosions near to you?
Yes. Now I'm on the district where where I can see, I can hear all, where I can not just hear, I even can see all how Russian military bombed us, and that's awful. For example, in 4 kilometers near my house, 2 hours ago, Russian military dropped a bomb from fighter at a factory. They also hit a residential building with shells. And also 1 hour ago, Russian military bombed Kharkiv hospital.
Some people have decided to leave their city, to get to a safer place. You decided to stay. Can you tell us why you're staying?
I can explain. It's almost unreal to leave my region, because when people from my region try to leave this one, Russian military kill the whole. They kill the whole family who tried to leave this one, and it's unsafe to this one.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Liza. I'm just curious, do you have family with you? Are you with friends? I mean, we're looking at you, you're by yourself, but are there other people with you?
Now I'm just with my family, with whole my family.
How are you guys surviving right now? Because you can't really go outside to go to the grocery store. I mean, how are you surviving right now? And did you lose power at all?
We have the special time when we can go to the supermarkets. Personally, I haven't go out more than 3 days. My mom and my dad go to the supermarkets one time at 2 days. It's unsafe because Russian military kill people on the street when they go to the supermarkets. That's really unsafe, but we don't have any other choices.
None of us here could imagine what you're going through. Nothing like this has ever happened here in the United States. Liza, I just can't thank you enough. You're so brave to join us, and you know, our hearts go to you and your family, and we want you to be safe. And thank you so much for speaking with us this morning.
Thank you, too.
So once again, that was Fox 32 in Chicago with that conversation there. You've probably seen this video, though, surveillance footage showing the moment an administrative building was hit during fighting in Ukraine. At least 6 people were killed by the explosion in Kharkiv. Explosions in residential areas forced a maternity ward to relocate to an underground shelter in Kharkiv's largest plaza, Freedom Square, was struck with a missile that you saw right there. The blast blowing out the windows and walls of surrounding buildings. Ukrainian President Zelensky labeled the attacks war crimes. We're also getting more video in of another deadly attack in Ukraine today on Tuesday after Russian forces strike a television tower in Kyiv. The Ukrainian Emergency Service say that 5 people were killed. Earlier in the day, missiles also striking in the heart of the eastern city of Kharkiv. Zelensky says Russia needs to stop its bombing efforts until ceasefire talks could be worked out. This following a preliminary round of negotiations that proved fruitless. Meanwhile, Fox News correspondent Trey Yingst in Kyiv tonight as fighting continues and is actually intensifying, and so is the economic pressure on Russia. Take a listen.
Yes! Yes! It's day 6 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and U.S. intelligence says the attack on Kyiv is stalled. A 40-mile-long Russian military column facing fierce resistance as it rolls slowly toward the Ukrainian capital. Senior Pentagon officials tell Fox News Russian troops are running out of basic supplies like fuel and food, and the Russian military significantly underestimated the strength of the resistance, backed by America and the West.
We are trying to do everything we can to provide them the assistance, whether it's security assistance, weapons, military assistance.
Now, there's a new concern. Russia allegedly targeting civilians with cluster bombs in Kharkiv, where heavy fighting has been reported for much of the past 24 hours. The UN Security Council holding an emergency meeting, with the U.S. floating the idea of stronger diplomatic consequences if Russia doesn't withdraw.
One can reasonably ask whether a UN member state that tries to take over another UN member state while committing horrific human rights abuses should be allowed to remain on this council.
The U.S. also imposing new sanctions as the Russian economy continues to deteriorate. And in Lviv, volunteers are busy making weapons, camouflage, and other necessities for Ukrainian troops, saying the targeting of civilians has only strengthened their resolve.
They put their lives at risk. They die there for us. If we can do anything, make a small impact and help them, then it is our duty.
And on Tuesday, the European Union voted overwhelmingly in favor of accepting Ukraine's application for membership. In Kyiv, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
And thousands of people are continuing to escape Ukraine as the war continues across the country. 677,000 people total since February 24th. That's the last reported number that we had. Heartbreaking stories of families being separated are being reported as an influx of refugees flood neighboring nations. Fox News correspondent Alex Hogan with more.
Certainly one of the largest in recent times. We haven't seen displacement of this magnitude in Europe since the mid-90s.
The United Nations is declaring the Ukraine refugee crisis the largest of its kind in Europe in over 2 decades. UN officials say conditions will continue to deteriorate at border crossings as the war between Russia and Ukraine rages on.
There's still long queues of people to get out, traffic jams, trying to find any way to find their safe route, their escape route.
Cold, frigid conditions have created a challenge for refugees. Some have walked hundreds of miles for several days to get to the Polish border and flee the ongoing crisis. Families exchanged tearful goodbyes at Lviv's train station Tuesday. Fathers are being separated from the rest of their families as they stay behind to protect the country against Russian forces.
I'm sure that we will see them soon. We stay on Lviv, we will help the volunteers, and we will do what we can do here in Lviv.
International students are also working with their countries to leave the war-torn nation. Universities in Ukraine say they are unable to provide any assistance, forcing students to hop on trains to neighboring countries.
My mom, she's waiting for me. She invests her money for my education, so I cannot be blocked in this country. So she's every day crying, why you? Have you taken your train?
The UN says nearly 700,000 refugees have crossed from Ukraine into neighboring countries. In London, Alex Hogan, Fox News.
Well, it is the top of the hour. I'm Daytona Everett. You're watching live now from Fox. It is 5 o'clock here in Phoenix, Arizona, 7 o'clock out on the East Coast as we are taking you through stories showing the escalation of war out in Ukraine at this time. We're just getting into the newsroom. Wall Street Journal reporting that American officials might soon shut off our airspace to Russian carriers. This would, of course, follow a series of other sanctions and also I guess you could say a binding of the support for Ukraine from several other countries, including the U.S. President Biden to be speaking about the escalation of war tonight at his State of the Union address. A live look from outside of the White House there as we are going to be giving you full coverage. Join us 8:30 Eastern Time to 10 o'clock Eastern Time for pre-coverage. We'll be showing you the whole address itself, and we'll also be getting reaction afterwards. So stay with us for that. We're getting an excerpt of what to expect. This is just a small part of tonight's speech from President Biden, saying throughout our history, we've learned this lesson. When dictators do not pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos, they keep moving, and the costs and threats to America and the world keep rising. That's why the NATO alliance was created, to secure peace and stability in Europe after World War II. The United States is a member along with 29 other nations. It matters. American diplomacy matters. Putin's war was premeditated and unprovoked. He rejected efforts at diplomacy. He thought the West and NATO wouldn't respond, and he thought he could divide us here at home. Putin was wrong. We were ready. Well, preparations are underway for the State of the Union address. We want to head out to Fox's Caroline Shively, who is in Washington, D.C., with how it is going to look this year.
A different look for this year's State of the Union address. Inside the House chamber, lawmakers could go without masks if they so choose, while outside, police have installed security fencing along the perimeter of the Capitol building. With the war overseas, the coronavirus pandemic, and rising inflation, President Biden will try to reassure the country there are better days ahead.
He will definitely spend time in the speech talking about the conflict in Ukraine. There's a lot the president wants to say to the American people this evening.
A recent Fox News poll found just 43% of voters approve of the president's job performance, and 76% say the economy is in fair or poor shape.
To me, the country is grumpy. I think, we've been through a very long pandemic. And we're also struggling, it seems to me, with the kind of economic turmoil that has resulted in inflation.
The Republican Party will get its chance to respond to President Biden's address when Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds delivers the GOP rebuttal.
As we listen tonight to the State of the Union, which is in crisis on so many fronts, I hope President Biden talks about what he will do to work with Republicans, because we have real plans to get control of inflation, to lower gas prices.
In an unusual move, multiple Democrats will also be giving a response to the president's address. On Capitol Hill, Caroline Shively, Fox News.
And we'll be listening in to GOP members from a little bit earlier today at that press conference. Stay with us through the hour here. We also heard from Secretary Antony Blinken, more so focusing on the Russian situation underway. Hear those remarks from today.
Ukraine with drinking water, gas to keep them from freezing to death, and electricity. Civilian buses, cars, even ambulances have been shelled. Russia is doing this every day across Ukraine. The High Commissioner said yesterday that Russia's attacks had killed at least 100 civilians, including children, and wounded hundreds more, and said she expects the real figures are much higher. And the casualties keep mounting, including the many civilians killed and wounded in Russia's monstrous rocket strikes that hit an apartment complex in Kharkiv yesterday. Russia's violence has driven over 500,000 Ukrainians from the country in just a few days. Children, the elderly, people with disabilities, who are making harrowing journeys through conflict zones. If President Putin succeeds in his stated goal of toppling Ukraine's democratically elected government, the human rights and humanitarian crises will only get worse. Look at Crimea, where Russia's occupation has come with extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, torture, arbitrary detention, the persecution of ethnic and religious minorities, the brutal repression of dissent. The Kremlin is also ramping up its repression within Russia, where, even before the invasion, it was shuttering human rights organizations and harassing, poisoning, and imprisoning anti-corruption activists and political opponents. Authorities reportedly have detained thousands of Russians peacefully protesting the invasions, as well as journalists covering the demonstrations. Russian officials issued a warning to the country's press that any reporting that refers to the assault as, quote, an attack, an invasion, or a declaration of war, end quote, in other words, that tells the truth, will result in media outlets being blocked and fined. And Russia's prosecutor's office said that any Russian who assists a foreign country, foreign organization, or international organization during its so-called operation may be imprisoned for up to 20 years. These are the human rights abuses this council was created to stop. If we cannot come together now, when will we come together? We must send a resolute and unified message that President Putin should unconditionally stop this unprovoked attack, as the Secretary General and the High Commissioner have done, and immediately withdraw Russian forces from Ukraine. We must condemn, firmly and unequivocally, Russia's attempt to topple a democratically elected government and its gross human rights abuses and violations of international humanitarian law. And we must take steps to hold the perpetrators accountable. This Council's decision to hold an urgent debate on the crisis in Ukraine is an important step toward ensuring documentation and accountability. I thank the many members who supported it. We must underscore Russia's obligation, even in its unlawful invasion, to respect international humanitarian law, including as it relates to the protection of civilians in the conflict. Council members should stop using language implying that all sides bear equal responsibility for the unprovoked attack of one side. This isn't even-handed. It's wrong and fails to place accountability where it belongs. The same goes for members who argue falsely that denouncing human rights abuses is politicizing the situation. It is failing to speak up about human rights abuses that politicizes the situation. We must reject Russia's attempts to falsely justify this attack as a defense of human rights, misappropriating terms that we reserve for the worst atrocities and disrespecting every victim of those crimes. Finally, we must press the Kremlin to respect the human rights of all Russians, including the right of citizens to peacefully express dissent and journalists to report the news, and provide information to the families of Russian soldiers who deserve to know the fate of loved ones killed in President Putin's war of choice. One can reasonably ask whether a UN member state that tries to take over another UN member state while committing horrific human rights abuses and causing massive humanitarian suffering should be allowed to remain on this council. Even as we focus on the crisis in Ukraine, it's far from the only part of the world where the council's attention is needed. In Belarus, the Lukashenko regime is brutally repressing civil society and the country's pro-democracy movement, using transnational repression to silence critics abroad and enabling Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In recent days, Belarusian authorities have detained hundreds of people demonstrating peacefully against Russia's attack. In China, the government continues to commit genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang, against predominantly Muslim Uyghurs and other minority groups. We urge the High Commissioner to release without delay her report on the situation there. We must redouble our efforts to address the growing humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan and press the Taliban to respect the rights of all Afghans, including by stopping the unjust detentions of women protesters and journalists, ending reprisals, allowing all Afghans to be educated and to work in every sector. The human rights crises in Burma, Cuba, the DPRK, Iran, Nicaragua, South Sudan, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen, among others, also demand this Council's ongoing attention. In each of these places, we must not only denounce abuses, but work to stop them and hold perpetrators accountable. Yet, at a moment when the world needs both moral clarity and unity from this Council, some governments are arguing that sovereignty gives countries the right to do whatever they want within their borders. It's no coincidence that many of the governments making this argument are systematically abusing human rights and have been eerily silent in the face of Russia's flagrant assault on Ukraine's sovereignty. The Universal Declaration on Human Rights begins with the word universal, because nations decided that there are certain rights that every person, everywhere, is entitled to enjoy. Members of this Council have a special responsibility to strengthen, not weaken, those rights. One way to do that is by welcoming scrutiny of our own records. In September, the United States issued a formal, standing invitation to all UN experts who report and advise on thematic human rights issues. We urge every Council member to take this step. We know we have work to do to advance human rights at home. Every member does. What matters is that we all hold ourselves to the same standards and work to address our shortcomings, as we are doing. Here's what else you can expect from the United States on this Council. First, we're committed to working with other countries, including those we don't always agree with, to advance human rights as members have seen in their engagements with our permanent representative to the UN in Geneva, Ambassador Sheba Crocker, and our new ambassador to the Human Rights Council, Michelle Taylor. Second, we've heard repeatedly that the United States has often focused more on strengthening civil and political rights than we have on strengthening economic, social, and cultural rights. People around the world are looking to us to do both, and we hear that call. Third, we'll continue to counter anti-Israel bias and the unfair and disproportionate focus on Israel on the Council. The Commission of Inquiry and Standing Agenda Item 7 are a stain on the Council's credibility. we strongly reject them. Fourth, we'll keep fighting for the human rights of LGBTQI+ people, people with disabilities, members of racial, ethnic, and religious minorities, women and girls, and all marginalized populations and people in vulnerable situations. In recent days, people on every continent have come out to demonstrate against Russia's invasion and for the rights of Ukrainians. They understand that if we allow the rules of the international order to be flagrantly trampled anywhere, we weaken them everywhere. As an Estonian student protester put it, if Ukraine is not a country, then President Putin can say Estonia is not a country either. We stand for these rules not in opposition to any government, but rather because we see our shared interest in striving for a world where all people of all nations enjoy human rights and peace and security. And because history has shown us the darkness and suffering that comes when these rules are abandoned. People in Ukraine and around the world are looking to us to stand up and stand together. We must not let them down.
Okay, so again, that was Secretary Blinken right there giving his remarks, saying we need to stand up as a people for Ukraine. Well, when we come back, we actually spoke with an organization who is standing up for the people of Ukraine, and through the Afghanistan withdrawal was helping withdraw Americans from there. They're kind of doing a similar thing right now, and Fox's LiveNOW's Christy Larson spoke with them. So you'll hear that conversation after the break.
Continue talking about this, a way that there's been so many people here in the United States looking to help those who are overseas, especially as now we know that there has been multiple refugees who have already fled the country. New numbers have now said that there's more than 677,000 people who have fled from Ukraine since this invasion. So speaking with us now is going to be Chad Robichaud, who is with Save Our Allies. He is joining us here live. And Chad, I know last time we spoke, we were talking about Afghanistan. Not only have you guys been over there helping get people out of the country, helping refugees resettle, now here again, same story. You guys have special operations headed overseas. Talk a little bit about what you guys will be doing.
In Ukraine for about a week, 2 weeks now, doing a lot of forward assessment for us, seeing what the real needs are, and how, you know, who's there, who needs assistance, who needs to get out. And obviously there's a lot of people. You've said over 600,000 people have already fled. There's a big need for Americans to get out. vulnerable people, women, children that aren't fighting, that aren't going to be fighting, and those who are wounded, who are already wounded, and needs to get medical care. And so I'm going to be leaving on Thursday and taking up another team to meet our teammate there. We're bringing in a team of very highly trained special operations medics, which we refer to as 18 Deltas, and going to go in and provide medical support and help with some other organizations and other efforts to move people safely out of Ukraine to get the medical care that they need. And, unfortunately, this is another time where, the veteran community is having to step up for the failures of our own government and do the right thing. We did this in Afghanistan. Save Our Allies got 17,000 people out of Afghanistan, second to the U.S. military. And, and here we are. We're gonna do it again and do the right thing.
And is that some of the biggest needs that you've been hearing, is just even some of that medical attention for people, since so many have been flooding this war-torn country?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the biggest things we're hearing is orphanages. Obviously, people are, the Ukrainian people are just scared for their children. They're scared for their women. I'm getting private videos sent to me that, we won't share publicly because we don't want locations to be disclosed, but orphanages where people are hunkered down in bunkers, and 50, 70 kids just bunkered and just terrified. And a lot of them are injured and need not just medical care, but to be medically evacuated out of Ukraine where they can get good treatment in places like Poland. And so we are going to be going into Poland. Our team is splitting up. One of our team members who is a former Special Operations 18 Delta Special Forces medic and now a surgeon is going to be meeting with some of the Polish people in Poland who are setting up a hospital there and being able to move people from Ukraine, from these devastating war zones where that's affecting the civilian populations, and move them safely into Poland where they get the medical care they need.
And as you've been speaking, I mean, I wanted to put up the map so people could see just some of those surrounding countries. We've been hearing, as you've said, so many people fleeing to all their surrounding countries that they can to get out of the path of this war as Russia continues with their invasion. So, Chad, how do you get yourself prepared mentally to go into situations like this where you know that you're going to be seeing, unfortunately, some very hard things to digest?
Myself, I did 8 deployments to Afghanistan as special operations. I just spent the last 6 months involved in the evacuations of Afghanistan. There's really no way to prepare for, seeing such tragedy occur to human life, especially unnecessary. But me and my team members have been talking. None of us have to do this. We feel a burden on our heart. Most of us people of faith, and we feel a burden on our heart that God's really just calling us and equipping us from our backgrounds and experience to go do the right thing to help people. And a lot of us have talked and just said, hey, if this was my wife, if this was my kids, if this was my family, I hope someone would come help us. And I hope someone would. I hope someone would come and help my family. And so that puts a burden on our hearts to go and do that.
And as we've been talking about, you're getting set to leave. What are some things you are hoping to come across? Because every time, of course, people are dealing with situations, you have to find a silver lining. Are you hoping to see some people, gathering together with other family members, meeting up with them? Of course, that might not be the case if they had to stay behind.
Yeah, you know what I was so encouraged about with Afghanistan. Afghanistan was the worst thing that the withdrawal was the worst thing I think I've ever been part of or witnessed in my life. But it was also one of the most beautiful things to see people come together. I run a Christian ministry for veterans called Mighty Oaks Foundation, working with Save Our Allies, and there was this Jewish organization that was donating their Christian ministry to go help evacuate Muslims. To see all these people coming together from different beliefs and walks of life and ideological positions, political positions, just come together as humans helping other humans. And I think that's what we're seeing in Ukraine right now. People that maybe don't vote the same or think the same and believe the same things, but just human to human getting together to do the right thing and help one another. And that's one of the things that I saw in Afghanistan. I'm really hoping to see that, and I think we already are seeing that in Ukraine.
You know, that's one thing that I have seen is so many different displays of that support for Ukraine, whether it be changing the colors on people's signage, maybe even holding rallies. I'm sure there's so many people here at home who are just wishing they could do more. So if they want to help save our allies, since you guys are going to be going over there and directly helping those who have fled the country, helping get more people out, how can we help you guys continue that mission?
Yeah, obviously these operations are very expensive. These are operations that the military should be doing, which they're very expensive operations. So we have to raise money. And, you know, for Afghanistan, we had such a generous, just overwhelmingly generous people step up to make that happen. And we've rescued 17,000 people. And so we're calling for the very same thing here in Ukraine. We need support. We need your prayers. And we need your financial support. And you can donate at saveourallies.org. It is a tax-deductible 501c3 donation. And so you can donate there, saveourallies.org. Our current operation for this feasibility study that I'll be doing over the next week is about a $250,000 campaign right now that we're trying to raise for that. So we need people to step up and that can do their part. And this is one way that they can contribute and be part of the solution.
And I know you guys have said, too, you're going to be there as long as you're needed. Any expectations as to how long you could possibly be overseas helping these Ukrainians?
You know, for me, I'm going to be going there for only about 7 to 10 days to set this operation up. And then we'll have guys that'll stay and sustain operations. I'll probably rotate in and out with some of our other leadership. But this could, you know, this is going to go on for quite some time. Even if this ended tomorrow, there's going to be medical needs. And I mean, the devastation that's already taken place is going to be, you know, it's going to take months or if not years to redo. And but I don't think this is ending tomorrow. It's going to continue on. And we're going to be there as long as we need to continue to helping.
Right. And then just one way that you guys are showing your support again is by providing all of that help to those who have been trying to escape. And of course, we appreciate you updating us. I know that, again, it's such a tough situation to be called upon once again after you guys just helped those Afghanistan refugees escape the country, then setting them up not only in countries around the world, but also right here in the United States and now here out answering yet another plea for help.
Well, again, you know, I hope this isn't a third one for us. You know, this has been but I'm so thankful to our team at Save Our Allies. We have such an incredible group of men and women who have stepped up and taken their skills or experience from the military and life and just put it into place to be able to make these make this operation happen. And again, we're ready to. I'm actually looking forward to getting there, getting my feet on the ground, meeting with my teammate, and planning this next operation and helping these people who need so much help.
Well, we certainly appreciate people like you. I know that there's many of us who wish we knew how we could help more, but obviously supporting Save Our Allies is just one of the ways that we can lend our own hand. So thank you again, Chad, for joining us and sharing a little bit more about the mission you guys have as you're going to be headed overseas. We hope that you guys can stay safe as you continue to provide support to everyone there, and appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Yes, thank you.
A great effort by Save Our Allies, and hopefully we'll be able to talk with them and see what it's like there down on the ground as they are helping these hundreds of thousands of refugees that are fleeing Ukraine in this time of war, in this time of escalation. We did report to you that the Wall Street Journal is saying American officials might soon shut off our airspace to Russian carriers. Would make a substantial difference against Russia at this time as we are imposing more and more on President Putin. As we're seeing from these explosions, he's not holding back either when it comes to attacking cities in Ukraine, especially Kharkiv, especially Kyiv. So more to come on all of that after the commercial break. Also, more to come out of the State of the Union address. We are just hours away, 8:30 to 10 o'clock Eastern time. We'll be giving you full coverage, reaction from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, reaction from political experts, and reaction online. As we know, the whole world is going to be watching this address from President Biden here, as he will be highlighting the situation with Russia and COVID-19, Build Back Better, so much more on that. Ahead of it, though, we'll be previewing with some of the remarks from Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans earlier today at Capitol Hill as Washington, D.C. is preparing for the big event tonight. In 2 minutes, you'll be hearing from Senate Democrats such as Senator Chuck Schumer, what he had to say after the break. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Daytona Everett. 5:30 here in Phoenix, Arizona, 7:30 out on the East Coast. So we're about an hour and a half away from the State of the Union address. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle coming together today on Capitol Hill, holding their own separate press conferences ahead of the major announcements from President Biden today. We'll start first with Senate Democrats, then you'll hear from Republicans. Kicking them off, Senator Chuck Schumer of New York.
Hey, welcome everybody. I'm glad to be joined by Senators Stabenow, Peters, Carper. So we had a great lunch discussion today. We heard from some of President Biden's staff about what he'll say in the State of the Union, and we're all excited about that. We're going to talk about there's a great deal we've accomplished in a short time with the slimmest of margins. And that makes the State of the Union a good opportunity to remind the American people of how much we've done. We got a lot more to do, but we've got a lot done. And this week, we're going to work to finish another major bipartisan bill that'll help improve one of the most popular and needed government agencies, and that is the Post Office. Thanks to the leadership of Chairman Peters and Senator Portman, we're on the path to passing a long overdue postal reform bill to strengthen mail deliveries, take care of our postal workers, put the Post Office on a path to long-term financial stability. Last night, the vote was overwhelming, 74-20. It shows the strong bipartisan momentum against this bill. And I want to be clear that this bill has enough bipartisan support to become law. It's the product of months of good faith negotiations led by Senator Peters, and we could have passed postal reform at the end of the last week of the last work period were it not for the capricious obstruction from the senator from Florida. Okay, so I expect that we will be moving forward on postal, and let me call on Senator Stabenow.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really excited to hear President Biden tonight. It's amazing how much he's been able to accomplish, and all of us working together have been able to do in 1 year, and we know there's more to do, and we're committed to doing that. Our Senate and House Democratic Policy and Communications Committees have invited guests virtually. We're glad we're going to be back all in the chamber together. There won't be folks in the gallery quite yet, and so we have each invited someone to a virtual reception and to be with us today. And these are folks that have been keeping our country moving through the pandemic and benefiting from our efforts during President Biden's first year. So we've invited teachers and parents and small business owners and construction workers and healthcare workers and people all across the country who can speak about what the American Rescue Plan and the infrastructure bill and other things have meant to them. My guest is Scott Hammondtree, who is the owner of a local music venue in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We've been able to provide support for 288 downtown theaters and arts and live venues that had to shut down completely under COVID. And they're now opening their doors, they're hiring their workers back, people are coming in and enjoying what they have to offer. So thanks to President Biden's steady leadership, truly steady leadership and competence, working with Congress, we have made enormous progress. We've gotten shots in arms, we've gotten tests in people's homes, and we've got kids safely back to school. We've passed an infrastructure law that's a game changer. It's creating jobs, strengthening our communities, and building a better America. And our economy has seen the strongest growth since 1984. The strongest growth since 1984. But too many folks are still feeling the squeeze of higher costs. And we know that. When you shut down the economy in our country and around the globe, and you see the supply chain challenges and the transportation challenges and everything else that has happened, we understand that we have to focus to get people back in a position where those costs are going down. We know it, the president knows it, and that's why he'll lay out a plan tonight to lower costs for folks while continuing our strong economic recovery. We'll strengthen our supply chains, we'll make more things in America, and like semiconducting chips that are so critically important for our auto industry. We'll press back on price gouging, which is very real, very real. Look at oil and gas prices and what is happening here. They set the prices, and there is price gouging, and I would expect more of that to come. We're going to cut costs for things that keep people up at night. We'll lower prices through competition that helps our small businesses and our farmers and protects consumers. The State of the Union is time to reflect on where we've been and to focus on where we're going. And I'm excited to see our nation moving forward and building a stronger America.
Thank you. Senator Carper.
Do you want Gary to go first on postal?
No, you can go ahead. Oh, you're not doing postal?
Oh.
Okay, well,
Gary,
okay. So I want to say, because I've been saving this up, neither rain, nor sleet, nor snow, nor fractured ankles can stop Gary Peters from getting the postal bill done.
Thank you, leader.
I've been waiting.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're doing it. Not fun.
That's good.
Exactly.
That's good. Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you, Leader Schumer. That's right. A broken ankle is not going to stop us as we move forward. This is something that has been literally 15 years in the works is to reform the Postal Service and deal with very onerous requirements that are levied on the Postal Service that no business in America has to deal with, or no other government agency, and that's dealing with pre-funding health care. A law that passed 15 years ago that saddled the Postal Service with this incredible onerous requirement that costs them money, and as a result of that, it makes it difficult for them to stay financially strong and to be able to provide first-class service to everyone else. We've been working over the last couple of years in a bipartisan, bicameral basis, working with my counterparts in the House, introduced legislation here in the Senate, which had broad bipartisan support, 28 senators, 14 Republicans, 14 Democrats. It passed in the House overwhelmingly a short time ago, and this week we're going to take it up here. I think the American public all agrees that the Postal Service is absolutely vital to this country. They rely on services from the Postal Service to deliver critical medicines, to have small businesses having their packages sent so they can continue to engage in commerce. The Postal Service is the only entity that delivers to every single address in America every single day. It is absolutely essential. In fact, it's in the U.S. Constitution. Ben Franklin was the first Postmaster General. But we have to put them on the kind of financial standing that allows them to be competitive. The bill we have before us will get rid of the pre-funding requirement, which right now requires everybody to be pre-funded, regardless of how many decades they may retire. It will also allow the Postal Service to do what every other company in America does, which is integrate Medicare into their retirees. And these are folks who have been paying into the Medicare their entire career. They've been paying into Medicare. They'll be able to integrate into Medicare. We've also had some very important features in this to protect service. We will now mandate 6-day delivery. American people want to know the Postal Service will be there for them each and every day, 6 days a week. We will also bring more transparency to performance, where individuals who are concerned about mail delivery in their area and they want to see what the on-time delivery rate is, will now be posted online by zip code, so you can look to see exactly how the Postal Service is delivering services to you on a weekly basis. Other reforms allowing the Postal Service to engage in non-postal activities as well. You've got post offices all across the country. That's an opportunity to deliver a variety of other services that will also strengthen the Postal Service. So we're excited that this is before the Senate floor this week. We hope there aren't any more delays. Unfortunately, we had a delay last week that prevented us from acting on it sooner. And let me be very clear. Every day that we delay on passing this postal reform bill makes it more difficult for the Postal Service to provide critical services to the American people. It's important we get it done. It's important for us to show the American people that the U.S. Senate knows how to get things done, knows how to do it in a bipartisan way, and I'm excited to vote yes in the days ahead.
Thank you, Postmaster. Tom.
I just want to say, I want to quote Winston Churchill. Churchill used to say a lot of things. One of the things he used to say is, the further back we look, the further forward we see. Further back we look, the further forward we see. If we look back far enough, roughly 35 years ago, the Constitution was first ratified in this country. And the state that ratified it first was Delaware. And one of the provisions, as Senator Peters has mentioned, one of the provisions that created a postal service. Ben Franklin was the first Postmaster General. And when they created the Postal Service, they did for a number of reasons. One is to be able to enable us to communicate with one another in these 13 colonies that became states. Another thing, they wanted to be able to provide a more nurturing environment for job creation, economic growth in the United States. The third thing they had in mind was to bind our country together. They're looking for a way to bind 13 separate colonies together into the United States of America. People ask me why have I been so interested in and worked on postal issues with Susan Collins and others for the last, almost 15 years. And it goes back to when I'm the last Vietnam veteran serving in the United States Senate. I remember full well being in Southeast Asia, and the best day of the week that we had was when the mail came. And we would receive newspapers, magazines, we receive care packages, cards, and letters. It was the best day of the week. My sister, my parents are deceased, but when my sister and I were sort of like clearing out their house down in Florida, we came across two things, two treasure troves of letters. One between my mom and dad in World War II, and another between my mom and her younger brother, Bob, who was killed in a kamikaze attack in 1944. Incredible memories that and communications and love that were communicated and really made possible by the Postal Service. All these years later, we still need to be bound together as a country. It's a struggle we go through every single day. The Postal Service has been for 200 and some years part of that binding that we need. And the need is as great as ever. I'll just to put it in a little different terms than our chairman has said. The Postal Service is the only entity that I'm aware of that goes to every mailbox in this country 6 days a week, rain or shine. And they carry not just mail, not just catalogs, not just magazines, not just care packages. They carry medicine. They carry ballots so that we can vote. and that people can continue to enjoy the right to elect our leaders. So this is not an idea whose time has come. Maybe it's an idea whose time has come again. The last thing I'll mention is the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee. We're very much interested. The major source of carbon emissions in our country comes from our cars, trucks, and vans. The largest fleet vehicles in this country is the Postal Service. And at the end of the day, the Postal Service understands the need to modernize their fleet. Their average 25 years of age. They're gas and diesel powered. They pollute a lot. And in order for them to be able to move to EVs and hydrogen-powered vehicles, they need our help, and through the Congress and the administration. And that, after we pass this legislation, we need to do this. And I commend again Rob Portman and Gary for the great leadership they provided. But a close follow-up to this is to make sure that they have the resources to go out there and modernize their fleet in a way that provides continued good service, but also a service that does not endanger our climate. Thanks so much.
And Tom Carper did a lot of great work on this postal bill before he was chair of the committee before Gary, and deserves a lot of credit as well. Questions?
On the question of the Ukraine supplemental, obviously that country needs urgently.
Yes.
Republicans are saying that you're refusing to treat defense and humanitarian aid equally outside of the omnibus in a supplemental package. What say you, and can you get this done?
Yeah, well, first we should get it done. Second, above all, we should be bipartisan on this issue. Nothing would make Putin happier than having Democrats and Republicans divided. President Biden has done an incredibly good job on Ukraine. All the naysayers, a lot of our Republican friends wanted us to pass the sanctions bill before the Russians invaded. That would have torn the alliance apart. The Europeans would have walked away. Now we've seen, amazingly, everyone predicted, oh, they won't do SWIFT. They won't do the Russian central bank. But with the European support and encouragement, and they suffer far more from these sanctions than we do, it's all happening. So I believe that President Biden's done a great job. I believe the country wants to follow his lead. I believe the country does not want to see partisan fights. We're going to work on a bipartisan, robust aid package with both military and security needs. There are very good discussions going on about that right now. The best place to include it is in the upcoming omnibus bill, and that's what we intend to get done.
Why wait for the omnibus bill? There are some Republicans who are arguing that this aid is needed now.
The omnibus bill is the quickest way to get it done. You just put a bill on the floor, you Rule 14 it, you wait for amendments, you wait for agreement. The omnibus is the quickest and most efficient way to get this done. Yes.
Years ago, you voted against the Iran nuclear deal. Do you support the effort to revive that nuclear deal now?
I think that having discussions on this issue is important. There were problems with the Iran deal originally, and many of us have urged in these discussions the Biden administration to deal with those problems. But I think the discussions are important and good.
What do you make of Senator Manchin's proposal to have more domestic oil production, maybe get some of these oil leases here, and is that not running afoul of many Democrats who are concerned about the environment?
Look, the bottom line is very simple. The U.S. is a major oil producer. We only get 1% of any imports from Russia, and the bottom line is this. The real problem with the increased gas prices is gouging and monopolies. Democrats are focused on those two issues. We are focused very strongly. You're going to hear a lot more from us on those issues in the near future. Yes. Yeah, well, the president's speaking on a whole lot of different issues. Cost cutting, something that I've been stressing and we've been stressing in the caucus. You're going to hear about things from the president on cost cutting, things like supply chain, things like shipping bottlenecks, things like prescription drugs and getting those costs down, and many others. So this is going to be a real focus for the president and for the Democratic House and Senate over the next months to come. Yes. Look, what I said is our focus, that's a very tiny amount in terms of the whole world oil market. Price gouging, And monopolies are the way to reduce the costs in a major way and to do it in a long-term, permanent way. Last question.
OAP changed their guidance on masks over the weekend in the Capitol. You're going to have people back in the chamber full strength tonight. And as you guys all came out without masks, but you've also got members who are still testing positive who can't be there. Overall, what kind of message do you expect to hear the president give on COVID tonight? What message do you want to send about where the Capitol is, where the country is on COVID?
Okay, let me say a couple of things. First, the president's done a very good job on COVID. If you look at where we were a year ago compared to where we are now, it's like night and day. And that's because the administration has done a good job, and the American people know that. When they're asked about how the previous administration and the previous Republican Congresses handled this compared to now, they see that there's a huge difference. Second, the administration has asked for, and we believe that we need some more COVID relief, because if there's another variant that comes, we need to have an ample supply of vaccines, of medication, of treatment. And we are fighting to get those done, and we hope our Republican colleagues will join us in that. It's a national necessity. Thank you, everybody.
So Senate Democrats there at Capitol Hill ahead of the State of the Union address, saying President Biden has been handling everything fantastic and that his COVID-19 plan is something to recognize amid this pandemic. A live look of Capitol Hill there as we are just hours away from the State of the Union, and we'll be showing it to you in full here on Live Now. I hope you stay with us. 8:30 to 10 o'clock Eastern time. We'll have preview coverage coming up here at the top of the hour. We are just 10 minutes away from 6 o'clock here in Phoenix and 8 o'clock out on the East Coast. Well, we heard from the Democrats. We're going to hear from the Republicans because we like to keep it unbiased here on Live Now. So stay with us after the break. You'll be hearing from some pretty recognizable Republicans. They held somewhat of like a little town hall situation with reporters on what their expectations are for the speech tonight. And we're going to play that out for you in pretty much full. That's coming up in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. State of the Union, full coverage here on Live Now. It is almost the top of the hour, almost 8 o'clock out on the East Coast, as we're going to be previewing all of the latest, what the expectations are. We'll have a full set of experts on what we think President Biden is going to say. How is he going to make remarks about the Russian war underway, the situation, the escalations around the globe? This is such an interesting time, and the president's address is not only going to be watched here in the United States, he is now on a global stage as well. Well, we heard from Senate Democrats earlier today at Capitol Hill. We heard from Senator Schumer. Well, we want to hear from the other side too, Senate Republicans who say that this address could be interesting tonight. Take a listen.
In the Capitol on the floor, and you didn't have to wear a mask. And I think this is really the first day that we've been able to allow to bring real people into the Capitol. So we want to thank you all for being here. And normally, on a State of the Union, members all get to bring somebody from their district. And what's great about that is you got real people with real challenges being able to communicate with one another. And what we thought we would do is, in this world that we live in today, try to have a real State of the Union here. There are so many challenges that are happening in our world and in our country. I mean, and so much has changed just in a year. I mean, inflation, we haven't had like this in 40 years. Crime rising in every community based upon policies about defunding the police. The border. I mean, there's so many elements of the border, just opening it wide, people on the terrorist watch list, fentanyl coming across the border. It's like every single community in America is now a border city. And so what we wanted to do, and energy, I mean, here we were, energy independent. We look what's happening in Ukraine today. Had we stayed, Russia would have less money. We could help Europe more. I mean, we want to make sure we change the course of history of where we are right now. And so what we wanted to have is a discussion about this. And we've got quite a few members here that can help us. We've got some great experts across the country. We got Elise Stefanik. This beautiful son, Sam, who, look, I have 2 children, but I've never seen a child smile so much as Sam does. He's 6 months old. He's fabulous. And his mom has fabulous shoes. I love those shoes. I just saw those. But Elise, why don't we turn it over to you? You can introduce the first guest and start our discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leader McCarthy, and thank you to all of you from across America who are here today. You are here to talk about the real State of the Union, which is in crisis. One of the crises that I hear about in my district is the border crisis, and we believe that every state, every community in this country is a border state and a border community. And I'm excited to introduce my friend Brandon Judd, who is president of the National Border Patrol Council, who is really on the front lines and represents tens of thousands of brave men and women who are addressing this crisis on the southern border. Brandon, honored to turn it over to you.
Chairwoman, thank you. Leader McCarthy, thank you. Chairman Scalise, thank you very much. Nice socks, by the way. We put on a uniform every day to go out and do the job because we want to protect the American public. That's why we do it. Under this administration, we're beaten down. The morale is the lowest that we've ever seen before. It's very difficult to put that uniform on. If it wasn't for the love of our fellow citizens, we just wouldn't be able to do it. When you look back at 2017, we had 310,000 apprehensions. That number rose 7-fold in 2021 to nearly 2 million apprehensions. The problem with that is the cartels, they use illegal immigration to flood our resources. It pulls us out of the field. It creates artificial gaps in our coverage. When it creates those gaps, they're then allowed to run their higher valued products, such as fentanyl, criminal aliens, and aliens from special interest countries. It's a huge problem, and it's just not solvable. This is a man-made crisis. It's simply because this administration took away all of the policies that President Trump implemented that were so beneficial to border security. And because of that, we're seeing something that is completely and totally out of control. If the Republicans take back the House and the Senate in 22, what policies will you implement to help us get the border under control so that we can protect the American public, which is what we want to do?
We are committed to securing the border, and one of our members on the front lines has been a leading voice in this. I want to introduce Tony Gonzalez from Texas 23.
I think Tony represents, what, more than 42% of the entire border?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, little chunk of the border.
Stand up, Tony.
Stand up, Tony.
Yes. Yeah, a little chunk of the border. I represent 42% of the southern border, over 800 miles. Appreciate the question. Appreciate everything you've done, Brandon, for advocating for our Border Patrol agents. And yes, they are tired. It is as bad as it's ever been, and it hasn't gotten any better. I'm on the border every single week, like many of our colleagues. We've all been out there. So, to your question, what are Republicans going to do? I think there's three things in particular that we're going to do. The first thing is we're going to hold hearings, right? We're going to have a nice parking spot up front for Secretary Mayorkas to come down to the House and hold hearings, and we're going to hold him accountable because it's his organization that he's leading on this. So we can do that on day one, and a lot of us have committed to doing that. So one is hearings. Two is the intelligence piece. You mentioned the numbers, and I'm a numbers guy too. I'm a cryptologist by trade. Cyber's my expertise. Numbers matter. Last year there were 4,103 Russians that came over our border illegally. How many of those are bad actors? How many of those are a national security threat to our country? We always think it's never going to happen to us until it happens to us. I mean, Putin is not a good person, right? He is backed into a corner. You never know what they're going to do. These are the type of things I think the intelligence community should be asking. We need to get ahead of a problem, not behind the eight ball of a problem. And then the third thing is resources. We got to give resources to three things in particular. One is building the wall. Look, walls work. We just got back from a trip from Israel. Walls work, right? They're a fundamental piece to security, right? So that's one. We'll get resources for that. Two, manpower, right? You got to have boots on the ground. You got to have somebody that's on the ground doing the work. Agents are tired. We need to raise the overall number of agents. And then the third piece is technology. Right now, these cartels, they're very sophisticated. They're using drones, and they're flying these drones from Mexico to the United States. And guess what's on these drones? Fentanyl, right? Fentanyl is small little pills. You don't need to have, hundreds of pounds of marijuana we're talking about here. We're talking small little packages that they come back and forth. Our agents are seeing this. The reason why they're so frustrated is because they can't do anything about it. They have a walkie-talkie and a flashlight. Let's arm them. Let's give them some resources. Why can't we shoot these drones down, right? They're invading our airspace, right? They're killing our children. Over 100,000 people have died from fentanyl. These are some things I think on day one Republican Party can do.
One of the issues that Brandon touched upon that is so important when we think about the border is the amount of illegal drugs, specifically fentanyl, that is flooding into our country. The leading cause of death of Americans age 18 to 45 is drug overdoses. And here today we have Christy Dieroff, who's a mom whose son died from an opioid overdose. As a new mom, my heart breaks. And I want to thank you for the courage of your advocacy. And I want to turn it over to you to share your story.
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. This is Wes. This is my middle son. I apologize because I have to read.
That's all right.
But I can tell you that once you go through, when you go through a life where your kids have struggled through addiction and it's a very difficult, long period of time, and then they finally die, it's really tough on you. And you can smile and pretend like everything's fine, but I apologize. I have to read because I cannot remember the words if I don't. Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you so much, Congressman McCarthy, for the invitation to speak on behalf of the millions of American families suffering due to the fentanyl crisis. My name is Christy Dieroff. I was a magistrate for 12 years in West Virginia with my husband, Rich. He was a trooper. We moved to Montgomery County, Maryland, when Rich began serving as a Pentagon federal police officer, and I worked as the Director of Communications for the National Organization for Victim Assistance, Crime Victims' Rights Organization. Most importantly, I'm a mother to three beautiful children, Curtis, Wesley, and Kimberly. Thank you, babe. Curtis, Wesley, and Kimberly. Unfortunately, Wesley's no longer with us. As my middle child, he was always pushing to keep up with his big brother. They took his training wheels off of his tiny bike when he was 2 years old because he didn't want to be a baby. He mastered it immediately. Good-looking, smart, athletically very talented, Wes was most remembered for his kindness. He started wrestling at 5. and won, for 2 years, he won every competition by pinning. He frequently cried while hugging his opponent after they held his arm up and told him that he won. He felt badly for the other boy. So he, while a student at WVU, Wesley injured his knee playing football with his friends. He went to our primary care physician for treatment. This began an increasingly slippery slope of pain pills and addiction, which overtook our lives. As a parent, there's nothing I wouldn't do to protect my children. Between HIPAA restrictions and the expansion of Obamacare, Wes was able to support his addiction for several years without our knowledge, until he failed out of college and abandoned his life to focus solely on feeding his addiction. Not until that point did he finally come to us and admit the struggle he was fighting. He moved to be near his sister then in Miami and began what I call the Florida Shuffle. The billion-dollar industry moves our children through a revolving door of rehabs, IOPs, halfway houses, NA meeting sponsors. Despite the endless energy, effort, heartache, and money we expended, nothing cured his disease. But he did enjoy the achievement of recovery beginning in 2013, and we saw our beautiful son had returned. In 2015, my husband and I moved to coastal Georgia, where Rich began a career as an instructor at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. Wesley felt he was in a fragile state of recovery in Florida at this time, so he asked if he could move up with us to Georgia. We said, of course. He was always handy, so I was blessed to spend most every day living and working with him for 6 months as we remodeled our new home. We were so proud of him. He had started his own remodeling business, had a lovely fiancée, Crystal. He was living in his own home and was turning his whole life around. He came over for dinner, and we had a sweet family evening. His last words to Rich and I were, "I love you, I'll see you in the morning." When he didn't, we rushed to his house to discover what every parent's worst nightmare. Wesley was gone. He had died immediately with the needle and powder packets still next to him. I grieved a stumble that took his life. I cried that wail that comes from so deep inside you, you don't recognize it, like a mortally wounded animal. After no investigation was happening locally, I found a DEA drug task force in Orlando, where Wesley had traveled to buy the heroin. I was able to provide them with the website, the Experience Project, that is owned by the Ultimate Software Group. Hugo Marganet Castro used the handle Pothead Juice on a page titled Heroin, 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 where he and countless others openly offered heroin, most any pills you could think of for sale. The drug task force arrested him within 2 weeks. He admitted to making well over 100 previous sales in 2015 before Wesley's. He knew they were not heroin. They were pure fentanyl. Over 100 times stronger than what people thought that they were getting. He's now serving a 20-year sentence in federal prison for murdering Wesley. That means thousands of other families aren't suffering because of him. He, I believe, was the first fentanyl prosecution through the U.S. Attorney's Office. Yes, and interestingly enough, that it has a minimum of 20 years to life, the sentence. And although both the prosecutor and the defense asked for, because he had pled to the charge, they asked for a reduced sentence. The judge gave him 20 years. Our children should be safe in their own bedrooms. Parents shouldn't have to worry that just by clicking through a few sites, they can buy a drug, any drug, and have it delivered. But any one of those can have fentanyl in it, and it probably does. This past year, over 100,000 Americans, 1 every 11 minutes, dies from opioid poisoning. The surge in deaths is squarely related to our failure to
Okay, so we have been listening in to House Republicans kind of preempt what President Biden will be talking about in his State of the Union address, which is about to get underway in a little under an hour here. I'm Andrew Kraft. We'll have full coverage of President Biden's first State of the Union. After the break, we'll be bringing on Democratic strategists, Republican strategists, to talk about what President Biden will lay out for the American people. We'll have more on that in 2 minutes. Welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. This is Andrew Kraft. You're taking a live look at the Capitol right now as in just a little under an hour's time. President Biden will be giving his first State of the Union address as president. Please join myself, my colleague Daytona Everett, and others as we kind of game out what President Biden will be saying to the American people on a number of different topics, like the COVID-19 pandemic, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, inflation, and so much more. Our coverage will be starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time, and it should be a very, very thoughtful, informative discussion. And then, of course, we will be showing you right after the Republican rebuttal that will be given by Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds. But now let's get back into some of the comments made by House Republicans earlier today, talking and kind of preempting what President Biden will be saying tonight.
To secure the southern border. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to know. And my question is, what do you think are the priorities to be able to stop this? We've had a 30% increase in fentanyl deaths since last year. So obviously, as we've had more people coming in, this isn't a shell game. We all understand it is what it is. COVID is not the issue. Fentanyl is the issue. And every one of us in this room, I can promise you, knows someone. And if they say they don't, then they're not being honest. They have a family member, a coworker, a friend, or a neighbor who either has died from it or who is struggling through addiction right now. So this, again, this is a man-made crisis. If we don't get the wall secured, it's just going to get worse. So is that the answer?
Not the only answer.
Or is prosecution, if we're going to catch and release these criminals, then that's not going to help either. Because if there's too much profit in it, they're going to continue to do it. So I'm just curious what ideas.
Absolutely. I'm going to recognize our ranking Republican member, Kathy McMorris Rogers, who's been working on this issue for many, many years. And thank you, Christy, for sharing your story. She's the of Energy and Commerce.
First of all, I just want to give you a hug. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, just thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. Thank you. So sorry for your loss. Yes. Oh my goodness. You walked in and I said, "You look like my sister."
Oh my goodness. Christy, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for advocating for so many others. I'm not sure people understand to what degree this is fentanyl is like a nuclear bomb that's gone off in our country. It's, as Kevin said, it's enough fentanyl to kill every single person in our country 7 times over. And we know where it's coming from. We know that it's been coming from China, the chemicals through Mexico and across the southern border. And you said it so well. We need to secure the border. That's pretty fundamental to a sovereign nation, is that you have a secure border to protect people, and in this case, to protect our children, to protect our friends and neighbors from fentanyl. It's, enough fentanyl is, so just, it's enough fentanyl on the ear, on Lincoln's ear on a penny.
Exactly, 3 grains.
Yeah, will kill someone. And I, like so many, it's shocking how many people, how many stories. It's the #1 killer of 18 to 45-year-olds. And so we must take action. We have the Stop Fentanyl Now Act, which would permanently schedule fentanyl and fentanyl analogs. And that's what needs to pass, because over the last 2 years in particular, we've seen the increase in fentanyl coming across the border, and it was the Trump administration that put an emergency order in place for fentanyl and fentanyl analogs, because what they do is they change just the mixture a little bit, so then the fentanyl isn't an illegal substance, and they can bring it across the border. So DEA has been operating under an emergency order, and it expired in May. We can't get it permanent right now. It's being blocked. And so we've gotten these short-term extensions over the since May. And we need to get it permanent. We need to permanently schedule fentanyl and fentanyl analogs.
It runs out March 11th. And we've offered on the floor and has been voted down, simply because the minimum maximum the Democrats do not want to stand with.
I'm sorry. Do you mind if I
Yes.
interject? Okay. There is actually the Department of Energy, they have scientists at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory that they study fentanyl, and they actually try to come up with different analogs that are possible. They keep it in what they call a journal so that they can inform law enforcement what they're dealing with, because with changing 1 or 2 molecules, it can change completely, and then for that to not be illegal, you still killed someone. So that is scary. They were estimating that there are hundreds of millions of chemical variants that are analogs, and some are so potent that an amount no larger than a single grain of salt. Yes. So that's, and yes. A lot of people don't understand that analog issue is out there.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's why the permanent scheduling for the analogs, fentanyl analogs, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I just met a mom in Spokane who lost her 23-year-old son the day after Thanksgiving. And he'd bought a pill on Snapchat, thinking he was buying Xanax for his anxiety. And it was laced in fentanyl, and it killed him in that instant. And like your son, had his whole life ahead of him. Great kid, and it's just heartbreaking. And unfortunately, this story is repeated too many times right now, and it just underscores the importance of securing our border and holding, giving law enforcement the tools so that they can actually hold these people accountable. The guy that sold this pill has not been held accountable. He's still there selling pills. So this is one of our top priorities. We are committed to the permanent scheduling of fentanyl analogs, continuing to do the research, but this is one of the many ways, or one of the main ways, that we must protect our children and protect our families here in the United States. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story.
Another individual that is on the front lines of the drug crisis, of course, it's always the family first, but law enforcement officers. And you talk to any county sheriff, certainly in my district, they will tell you about the uptick in these tragic, heartbreaking stories. We have Sheriff Richard Jones here today from Butler County, Ohio. And our law enforcement officers have been under huge strain and challenges, especially given the Democrats' defund the police rhetoric and policies over this past year. We as House Republicans stand strongly with our law enforcement. So I want to turn it over to Sheriff Jones.
Yes, thank you.
Why did we know you would be the sheriff?
With the cowboy hat.
We didn't need a badge, you just need the hat.
I'm the only one in D.C. that has a cowboy hat on. It's easy for your staffers to find me out front. Listen, we've been under attack. It's unbelievable. We can't even hire policemen and police women. They won't even take the test. Do you blame them? And they're under such scrutiny. They do their job. They want to put them in prison. We can't even buy bullets anymore. You can't get them. There's such a shortage of bullets. Now we're going to have a shortage of gas. And you know what we're going to end up doing? We're going to have less patrol because we can't afford gas, fuel. We've had fentanyl. A friend of mine, his daughter died. Murphy's in Butler County. Really a sad situation. It destroys the family. We have fentanyl coming across the border disguised in baby aspirin. I want to repeat that. They're disguised in baby aspirin. They have no morals when they bring this stuff across. They know they're going to ship it and put it into the hands, and they're going to cause people to die. They want us to die. The drug cartel actually develops customers. They have a drug called cheese, and it's to develop grade school kids. They can use their milk money to buy this. It's not to make them high. It's to develop customers. And here we are with our heads in the sand. We can't hire police officers. We got the Democrats have made police the enemy. They can't change that. They've looked at them and demonized them. These police officers, when they do their job every single day, they have to go home. They're shot at. They return fire. They're not even allowed to return fire. I've had 3 babies born in my jail. Just 3. Don't sound like many. Thousands of jails throughout the United States. These 3 babies were born addicted to drugs, coming from Mexico. 3 babies. Their little legs quiver and shake. We can't even, in law enforcement, we can't even get a call. Our leader in law enforcement, in the Sheriff's Association, there's 3,300 sheriffs, can't even get a call to the White House. We get a staffer that's 22 years old, can't even get a call to the President of the United States. When President Trump was there, he was surrounded with law enforcement. Saw these hats at the White House a lot. Police chiefs, sheriffs, law enforcement. Here in Ohio, if you don't think the border is a problem, Larry Devers, who was the sheriff in Cochise County, I've been to the border. He told me they don't stay here. They come to the inside of the United States. They come everywhere. They ship them in the middle of the night. They bust them in. They're in my jail. I put a sign up once. If anybody didn't know where they was at, it pointed to the Butler County Jail, said, they're here if you want them. So, my question for you is, will the Republicans help us fight the border issues and help us with our law enforcement and our community? That's my question.
Absolutely. And to answer that even further, Jim Jordan, our ranking Republican on Judiciary.
Thank you, Elise. Sheriff, good to see you. It's as you said, it's not easy being in law enforcement these days. So we appreciate what you do and all the folks in law enforcement. do. And Sheriff Jones, even though he's from Butler County, Warren Davidson's district, he is known throughout our state as doing great work. So we appreciate you you being here. It's all driven by bad policy. I mean, the reason we are where we are is, when you defund the police, you shouldn't be surprised when you get more crime. When you don't have bail, you shouldn't be surprised when you get more crime. When you have prosecutors who don't put bad guys in jail, you shouldn't be surprised when we get more crime. It's just common sense policy. I heard Brandon talk about this all the time. Bad policy leads to bad outcomes. Look at the border. When you allow 2 million people to come into the country, you're going to get bad outcomes. That's what the Biden administration has done. When you quit building the wall, when you get rid of the Remain in Mexico policy, you're going to have bad outcomes. So Republicans are committed to doing the right thing, to doing the common sense thing when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to our border, and to stopping the drug flow that happens as a result of a border that's not secure. I would hope Joe Biden tonight would go up there and say, I'm going to reverse every stupid policy I've done. I don't think he'll do that because his party is controlled. But this is so important for us to understand. His party is now controlled by the left, and they won't let him, even if he wanted to do it. So the only way we get this back is for the American people to make a change, and I think they're fixing to do that this November. There's a great line in the opening scene of the movie 1776. John Adams is in the bell tower, and he starts walking down the steps into that hall where they drafted the Declaration of Independence that hot summer. And as he walks in, he opens up the movie by saying this. He says, 1 useless man is a disgrace, 2 are a law firm, and 3 or more are a Congress. And I have had it with this Congress. I think the American people have had it with the stupid policies they see coming from the Democrat-controlled Congress and the Biden administration. And they are itching, they are fixing to make a change and put the Republicans back in charge and make Kevin McCarthy Speaker of the House. And that's what we got to focus on. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Jim. And Sheriff, your member is here. Warren's in the back. It's actually his birthday, so he does a great job. But one thing I would tell you, and it goes all the combination here, and it's some of the things that Jim talked about. And if you want that canary in the coal mine is America waking up. I'm from California, and in Los Angeles, they elected a DA, and we've watched this before, where Soros has gone and elected these DAs. They're going to pick and choose what law they want to uphold. That's not their job. Their job is to uphold all laws. They're now recalling him based upon those actions. And I will tell you, it doesn't matter what spectrum you're on, because every single American wants to feel safe. And you asked us what we're going to do. I promise you this. We won't defund the police. We'll add to the police. And what we'll do, too, is we're looking at, because a lot of this is a local issue and also a state issue, but what can we do federally? I mean, I think back to what Ronald Reagan did when he wanted to raise the age of drinking, right? But it's a state issue. He said you could have transportation money as long as your drinking age is 21. I'm not telling you how to change the age, but maybe go. What about when we do these cop grants? You can have the cop grant money as long as your DA doesn't pick and choose and upholds all laws. And when it comes to fentanyl, that story is everywhere. And, you know, it's an addiction. It's a disease. And it's not your son's fault. Your son Jim Jordan didn't tell you, but your son probably looked up to him. That guy's a champion wrestler. What were you, 162 and 1 or something? I mean, and his sons are, and he's run a camp like that. I mean, they're known as great wrestlers, but you get hurt. And he went to the doctor, prescribed something that made him addicted to it, and he continued further. But he didn't know that was fentanyl in it. And what's happening because of the border, and where does it start? In China. I'll tell you, before COVID hit, there was a group of senators who went to China, and they were having a meeting with this general in the military. And he starts lecturing them. He says, America, you're weak. You're weak because you believe in God and you take fentanyl. Who brings us the fentanyl? It comes from China, and it only is able to come into America because our borders are been opened up. And they bring it through in a water bottle. How can you find with all these people coming in and you don't, it's hot, they have a water bottle, you don't know. And now what we're finding, because you have so much, they're lacing it. So it doesn't matter where you live. You don't have to live along the border. Any place in America. College campuses, and they're just like what Kathy said, they're going on SNAP, and they think they're buying something else, and they're waking up dead. And it doesn't matter what family you are, it's going to touch all of you. So we have to do more than just the border. We've got to go after China. We've got to secure our border. We've got to go to the DAs. And we've got to provide the resources so you could do your job, because people don't want to go do the job anymore. And do you blame them of being an officer, risking their lives, and then get blamed for? I think you'll see a major turnaround. So, yes. And it's not just American families want to feel safe in their community. They financially want to feel secure. And we haven't had inflation like this in 40 years. And what inflation is a tax on every single American. And it really hurts. I mean, it was shocking to me when I watched President Biden said inflation was temporary. It's not a big deal. It's not something to be worried about. You go to the grocery store, you go to the gas station, it's no matter, you try to buy an avocado, it doesn't matter what you're buying, the price is rising. And what that means, when something costs more, you got to do without something else. And people are making choices. So what I want to turn to is Patrice, a mom of 3 boys, 2 of which are under the age of 4. I want you to tell me where you're noticing these prices rise day in and day out.
Thank you. I'm Patrice, and thank you so much for hosting this forum. I work with the Independent Women's Forum. We are an organization of women who speak to women and speak to the issues that expand our opportunity and our freedom. And you know, as a mom of 3, I have 2 toddlers, I buy a lot of milk. And over the past year, like many families, I have spent at least $1 or more per gallon compared to this time last year. And I think the rising prices are something that it's a struggle. I mean, when you consider that inflation is up 7.5%, real wages, which is what people get to take home every day, is down 2.4%. So that means your purchasing power is lower than before. And I think, you know, it's a struggle. Now, you mentioned the White House, the administration has said this was transitory. I was born in 1982, so I have not seen inflation like this, and I think many millennials can agree with that. We don't believe it anymore, because we're now 6 months into this, and there doesn't seem to be any stopping to this inflation problem. We've also heard that, you know, that increased federal spending is going to be the solution. Build back better. That's apparently supposed to, the trillions of dollars is supposed to, I don't know, magically make our inflation reduce. You know, that's, for most regular people, that doesn't make sense to them, and I don't think it makes sense as an economist who looks at these numbers on a regular basis. So my question is, you know, connect the dots for the American people between this idea that massive federal spending, increased federal spending, is going to somehow slow inflation, and then also when I consider how much it costs just to fuel my car and get me to work on a regular basis, you know, how it's not connected to energy policies that were reverted or changed on day 1 of the Biden administration. So please connect the dots for everyone. And then also, what do Republicans plan to do if you take over at the next year?
I don't know where you live, but I'd like to recruit you to run for Congress. So fabulous. But that's exactly what you're talking about. Buying milk every day, seeing it. I'm going to bring in an expert here. This Congressman, Brian Stile, he's got a great smile, but he is one of the smartest men I've ever met. The Democrats created this committee. It was a select committee on economic disparity and fairness. And they packed it with every socialist they had. And so I went to Brian and I said, I'd like you to serve on this, because not is he just an economist and others, he understands what the average person goes through every single day, but he could put it in perspective. And I thought he would be upset, like I was mad at him to do that. This guy walks in every day happy because he wants to have that debate. Brian, why don't you answer a few of her questions?
Thank you very much. First off, thanks for buying milk. I'm from Wisconsin, so you can't buy enough milk. So that's a good thing. But we got to get prices under control, because what you're saying is impacting moms and dads all across the country. Inflation's a tax on everyone, as Leader McCarthy said, but it really clobbers low-income workers and seniors on fixed incomes. And I can't tell you how many moms and dads are frustrated when they go to fill up their car with gas and see the gas prices going up. They go to the grocery store, bills are more expensive. Everything they're doing, the costs are going up. What can we do? One, I think we should take pride in the fact that we stopped Build Back Better. The Democrats wanted to continue down a path towards more spending and removing the dignity of work. What we need to be working to do is rip the Band-Aid off the COVID-era policies, get workers back to work, and get our spending under control. In the House of Representatives, we control the purse strings. We can control the spending and get a path to get ourselves back to balance. The other piece we need to do is unwind the energy policies of the Biden administration. Starting on day 1, the Biden administration sent a signal to everyone in the United States that they were opposed to oil and gas being produced here in the United States when they killed the Keystone Pipeline. That was the signal that they sent,
And it's not only made gas and energy more expensive, including home heating bills this winter, which are up 60% for the average family in Wisconsin. Not only has it done that, it's made our national security less secure as we see ourselves importing oil from Russia. So we have an opportunity to unwind the Biden administration's energy policies. We have to rip the Band-Aid off the COVID-era policies. We have to get workers back to work. We have to get our spending under control. And we can do that when we have Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And one of the parts you raised early on about the spending, one of the first things the Democrats did when they took over everything was to spend $2 trillion. They called it a COVID bill, but only 9% went to COVID. And remember, when Omicron came back and no one could find test kits, you just spent $2 trillion, but none of it was available there. And we warned them it would cause inflation. That's exactly what they did. And what Brian was talking about, these policies, what the Democrats do is a lot of the programs will have a work requirement. They remove the work requirement. And then they created incentive for you to stay home. And so you can make more money by not working in the process. And then that makes small businesses have to pay more to try to even get somebody to work. And could you imagine it? Look, I started small business when I was 20, and there's 3 lessons I always learned. I was the first to work, last to leave, and last to be paid. But could you imagine owning a small business going through COVID? And then you got government paying people more to not go through, and you're just a small business trying to struggle. And so we've got a small business owner here, Joe Samus. He's a co-founder and owner of Flags of Valor. And you're trying to struggle through everything with COVID, government competing with you. You're making orders to try to sell something, but your prices of your supplies are going up. You got to try to pass it on, but how do you pass it on when it changes every time you order some new supply? It's very difficult. So you end up eating some of it, and it's just so difficult. So